All right, I think we got a fun one today. I'm going to do a drum cover of a song I first heard 30 years ago, but we're going to sit down with the original band member, composer, and musician of this song from the band Cerulean. His name is Rick Bolander, a friend and classmate from the Air Force Academy class of 1995. Now, the first time I heard that Rick was in a band, it was John Hamby picked me and Mike Pugh up and said, hey, we're going to go see Rick and Cerulean play at Club Cocadrille in San Francisco. The second time I heard him was in LA after Matt Mendel's rehearsal dinner where Rick was playing at a local club. I don't remember tons about those live performances because I think I vomited either before or after each show, so it's a little hazy. But I do remember the distinct sound. And I still listen to that album once a week, ask my wife. I mean, the sound of that album really caught my ear, and specifically the song City Limits, which I'm going to do a cover of, has an amazing drum part and the lyrics are so good. So with that, let's go sit down with Rick and talk about how he crafted that song and what it meant to him in those days. Let's go. I'll set the table a little bit. It's 1995. We all graduate and disperse our separate ways.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next thing I hear is Bone going, let's go watch Bolander play down in San Francisco. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's in a, like, I was like, wow, you know, military schools aren't fertile grounds for forming a band. And you just don't think that that kind of thing's going to happen with guys that graduate and go into the military. So how
Yep.
does this work? I assume you show up in LA in 95. And then in those 3 years, how is this band forming?
So the reality is you got to rewind a little bit before that, right? So, I'd grown up in bands and stuff and doing that kind of thing in high school with friends. And, that's where, Mike McCabe and I first met in junior high. And then another Mike, very close friend of mine, Mike Domino, who will come into the story a little later. So those two guys, I'd been in bands with in high school. And when I got to the academy, obviously, there's just a massive focus towards everything but that, as you can imagine. But come like sophomore or junior year, I got like a little 4-track cassette recorder. I'd started writing and recording some of my own songs there initially. And, a handful of those kind of carried over when I went out to LA. So right after graduation, we had our like 60 days of vacation. We kind of went off and went on adventures and stuff. And one of the things I did was just go home and visit my family. Those two guys were there. They had heard, some of the songs that I had recorded and were like, hey, let's get together. Let's see what can happen. So, Mike McCabe, the drummer, Mike Domino, who was a bassist, we literally got together in my mom's garage in like the summer of 1995, hashed through a few of the tracks that I had done acoustically. Only one of those ended up making it onto the Cerulean record later. But yeah, we just started interacting and we had this really neat vibe that happened. And Mike McCabe was like, dude, we got to do something with this. And I live in Connecticut and you live in LA. So something's got to happen. And I don't know what it is yet, but we're going to figure that out. Fast forward a couple years to 1997. I had started just doing little like open mic, acoustic things on Sunset Strip, just here and there. Mike McCabe shows up at my doorstep, like having driven across the country. And he's like, hey man, I'm here. Let's start a band. And I'm like, really? Okay. It hit me by surprise because people tell you stuff, right? They're like, hey, Travis, we're going to go do whatever. You're like, okay, buddy. Yeah, we'll see. So there he is standing on my doorstep in like March or April of 1997. And, from that point, we really started taking it seriously and started writing and crafting these things. And occasionally I would take some vacation and head back to Connecticut. So the three of us would get together, and the inklings of that record came together really just Mike and I writing together. And that particular song, City Limits, was, just a jam that the three of us kind of came up with, just at the beginning of that song. And it just, we would go and sit on that riff and that jam for just hoping something would come out of it. And eventually it did.
Yeah. And it immediately caught my attention. That song in particular. I don't
Mhm.
know. I've told you I'm a drum enthusiast, so I can't speak to the guitar playing, but
Sure, sure.
the sound of that album to me, I know you've recorded three, but I always go back to that album because of it's got such a distinct sound to it. And I
Yep.
can remember playing that, and it opens with that tom groove, and you're like, oh, it just sounds so good. And then very early, second line of the song, it says, he climbs the garden wall to see if his dream's still there. And I was like, this is the thing I think we all fight is the corporate world and this conformity because we've
Yeah.
experienced that for the last 4 years at the Air Force Academy, right?
Mhm.
Like, how do we fight this conformity? So, what were you thinking when as you're writing these lyrics?
Uh, you know, to just kind of peel the onion a little bit on I guess what I'll loosely call my process. Very often it's like the music is coming first, right? And typically, Mike and I would just be in the rehearsal room, and either I'd come up with something that, as we were just kind of goofing around, I'd come up with something, and he'd go, "Ooh, I like that. Wait, keep doing that." Right. And then he would sort of build off of it. And, he's a very, very musical drummer. So, he was really paying attention to what was happening with the melody, where the accent points were. And so we would come up with these pieces, and literally we would just like hit record while we were in there and just keep track of all these things. Right. And this is not unique. A lot of musicians do this. A lot of collaborators do this. And you'll have these series of like riffs and licks, and we called it our lictionary, right? And it was just, we would record these things, and then we'd go back and listen to them later and go, hey, I kind of like that. Maybe if that went with this, we could put them together. And by roundabout way of answering your question, the song really came and created a mood, right? And for me, that mood was wistfulness, nostalgia, just atmosphere, right? And um, very often the lyrical content, and really I have no idea what the song is about at first, because frankly, like most people, I'm singing nonsense into it. Like I'll have a vocal idea, and it's just like watermelon, watermelon, like you'll have just some nonsense words that you're just kind of putting together. And, the phrasing of some of that nonsense, like just sometimes bubbles up in phrases. And, uh, that first phrase, like, boy cannonball smiles, right? And like that, I mumbled something that sort of sounded like that to me. And I was like, okay, let me write that down. Let me see where this goes. Because you start kind of building out the structure and the framework of the arrangement, and then you start realizing what the song is about. So it's there are writers who can go in and say, I'm going to go write about this, and they go in and they start crafting it, and it comes out just amazing and authentic. And every time I've tried to do that, it comes across as really forced and really lame. So just like a no-win approach. And it's hard, right? Because you really have to kind of give over to this thing and trust the process of that nonsense hopefully meaning something at some point. And somewhere in there, right? You'll have pulled together enough lyrical pieces that it starts to congeal into an idea that you can flesh out a little bit and maybe go rewrite something and say, hey, if the song's about this, that piece doesn't make sense anymore, and let me readdress that and maybe try and find something that works a little better. So long answer, but really it was the mood of that sort of hypnotic. The song is in 4/4, but the vibe is a very waltzy 3/4 kind of a feel, and
Let
it
me
was
stop you
important.
right there because
Yeah, please.
I'm laughing at myself because I could have sworn it was 6/8, 1 2 3 4 5 6, 1 2 3 4. It's like you
Yep.
said, it's
And
that waltz.
it could be
It's
right.
that waltz because you sit right back on the four. So that's this 1 2 3 4 5
Hmm.
6, and you just kind of swing in your hammock as you're
Yep.
playing.
It's great visually. Absolutely that. And there when we made that record, Mike was not a huge fan of recording to a click, really didn't want to. And a lot of his musical heroes, like John Bonham, Alex Van Halen, like those kinds of guys with the big bombastic sound, but just a very natural but like almost guttural approach to the drums. They almost got so good to where they didn't really have to. I know Bonham almost didn't exclusively, at least as far as I know. I think Van Halen did in some spots, but so it was very uncomfortable and awkward for him to make that work. And we were like, okay, if we're going to do this to a click, because this kind of has to happen this way. I mean, I recorded the guitars, I recorded the bass, I recorded the vocal. We were laying everything over that like foundation of drums. Again, not an uncommon approach. Um, but it was like, well, wait, is our click going to be like pop, 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 pop? And Mike's like, I kind of can't have it that way. I need it as pop, 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 pop. So that was how we were running the click, despite the fact that every other aspect of the song is in this 1 2 3 4 2 2. It's like that's how the vocal lines go. That's how the bass and the guitar kind of syncs. But to your point, it's like, I guess mathematically, could you call it 6/8? Sure, why not?
That's what I played it as.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense some in places where, um, I think you'd mentioned that one spot that you'd said you were struggling with was kind of that Into Days bridge, right? Where he's like, Into Days, and it's just like, wait, where's the emphasis here? And it's almost like to end, 1 2 and 2 2 and and it's once you'd kind of latched onto that grid, it probably made a lot more sense pulling it together, right?
Oh God. I told you the tom groove wasn't the hard part. And by the way, what you're describing, he is a musical drummer. He's not a basher because
No. Well, let me take it back. Hold on that thought, but yeah. So as you remember, when we played live, it was like, man, like the volume was massive. But he is a basher. But like you're right, there's the creativity is the touch, right? And yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
It's very musical. And when the thing, I would lose grip of the song every time it goes into days because it starts floating and there's like no structure. And I'm going 1 2 3 4 5 6, two. Like I had to hard, like, I don't know if my lips are moving in the video or not, but I'm like I could not, I had to count like with a death grip to
Yeah.
maintain form on that song. So, but
Yeah. It's just
he does.
where does it, because he just leaves it hanging out there, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
when does it come back and how does it come back?
And
Yeah.
then you hear this crash and you're like, what was that on? Was that on three, two? Like it was driving me crazy. But the
I
thing
have to tell you, man,
he does
he would
well,
enjoy this conversation immensely right now.
the thing he does really well particularly in that song is the groove at the beginning is carried out through the entire song. So it's solo at the beginning and end. And then
Mhm.
when it goes into days, it comes back into structure, and then it's on the ride.
Yep.
Like that groove carries the whole song.
It does. And it's funny how he managed to maintain that feel in what's kind of effectively almost a four on the floor verse, right? It's just do, do, ga, do, ga. It's he straightened it out because he knew, okay, the focus here is on the vocal, right? And if I'm being too busy on what's happening with the drums, it kind of takes away from what's happening with the vocal. Like again, he's always been a very just an outstanding compositional drummer. And I think with most, I'd say this with most rock and roll bands, but you could say this with most musical artists. It's like there's always going to be one or two songs on a particular record, if that's kind of if that's the structure they work in, right? If their releases aren't just singles and one-offs and collaborations, right, which a lot of the stuff nowadays is, that's just how it goes. um if you're doing an album, very often there's going to be one or two almost like bellwether songs that are like, that's going to set the tone for the next album. Like you can almost hear it, right? It's sort of like that. There's something happening there that is going to be very transitional into that next album. And I think City Limits was one of those. Um, and another song on that record called Open Mind was really, really just a signal that was like, okay, that sound is going to be a large aspect of the next record, and so forth, right? I mean, you listen to Radiohead, it's like there's just all sorts of just sort of like staple tracks in their albums that kind of carry forward. But back to the point about Mike, it's like a very compositional drummer, who's very mindful of other things that were going on, volume notwithstanding. But that was something we had to learn as a live band, as a recording band. That it's like, dude, there's volume, right? There's volume and relative. If we're bashing all the time, it sort of means less, and it's hard to distinguish the pieces. And that's all a foundational punk rock thing. It's like just bash it out, start to finish. Um, Gosh, some of the best drummers in that style, Trey Cool, right? It's like you did a Green Day piece not long ago, and he's just the ultimate musical bash it out drummer. Him and Travis Barker, right? I mean, they destroy it, but it's hard in that style to really get those dynamics, right? And Mike worked hard on that, really worked hard to learn that and try to figure out how to make that work within the context of the song, let alone just try to perform it live. It was a challenge.
You know what's interesting that you said open mind, and here's why. I swear to God, yesterday I go, I think that's going to be the next one I try to record. And the interesting part is in the 25 years or whatever I've been listening to Skylight, I don't even hardly remember that song.
Mm-hmm.
It's not in my conscious is like Far Beneath and Far Below, City Limits, and these Rings of Light, these other ones. And then I was like, look at that little gem. How come I don't remember that? And I was like, I think that's the next one I'm going to try to record. It's a great
Oh, that's cool. That is cool. It was probably the last song written for the album. Even even that little interlude last minute was kind of done already. It was just that was like just a rehearsal riff that just never developed beyond it. And I was kind of like, you know what, I love this piece. It's fine if that's all it is. And then Open Mind was like kind of almost written in the studio, which is, when you're a young band starting up, it's like you don't have time to do that, or at least back then, right? It was like every minute was on the clock. And even though, we were working with a producer where we were recording it in his house, in his residence, in Mount Washington, in the hills of LA. You don't have time to mess around. You kind of want to have your stuff together when you go in. Nowadays, gosh, everything's here, right? It's like you can take your sweet time and, just get completely bogged down with option anxiety. It's fantastic. But, it's like the forcing of the issue of like, hey, man, you want to do something with this. You want to try and make it happen. Here you are in the studio. You've got some time to do it, but not a lot. So you don't have a lot of time to mess around. Which, again, I think creatively, these limitations are just, they're gold. They're gold because they really force you to make choices and live with them. And that song, I think, was just, to your point, it's really just kind of like off the map a little bit relative to just what else is going on. And, yet another, I think, opportunity where Mike got to, I don't know, just really kind of expose his influences, right? I mean, the song starts out with a complete like Stuart Copeland hi-hat, I mean, it's like the beginning of every little thing she does is magic, right?
Yep.
You know, it's boom, there you go. And it's sparse, right? Very sparse.
For sure. Yeah. Apologize to Mike in advance for me for his
Sure.
for his song that I destroyed. Um, but so my rule when doing this is one continuous take. Now, this probably took me 15 or 20 takes because I kept messing up. But what's the point if you're trying to improve of trying to edit to the sound of the song? I just did one continuous take and it'll be obvious where I'm off and it'll be very clear. Start the song just on the iPhone, then I come in, it's very obvious. And I
Mhm.
kind of like to do that anyway, just so people know you're not sort of messing with the mix and you're not trying to make it sound perfect. So
Sure.
when you see me at the end of the video, that's genuine excitement that I'm finally done because I bet it was at least 15 takes doing that. And of all the songs I've tried to record, this is the first one where I turn off the original track and I felt like the drums were solid all the way through because usually I'll turn off the original track and I'll like I'll miss a kick beat or I'll have missed the snare. And I'm like, oh God, that's awful. So this was the first one where it actually, without the original track, sounded pretty decent. So
Awesome.
I was happy
Awesome.
with this
Well,
one.
I mean, it's not like you know, it's not like you picked an easy song. You know what I mean? It's yes, it is a standard pop structure, but it's like the drum part is in no way like that's an advanced drum part, you know?
It felt like
Um,
it was an ass kicker. Before I even tried to record it, I was probably playing it for 2 weeks all the time just to get to a point
cool.
where I could try to record it. So yeah.
Well, I guess I wish I thought about it before, but it's like it's interesting. I went through the process of, you know, all of that record was recorded on half-inch analog reel-to-reel tape. You know, it was like well, Pro Tools was around, but we couldn't afford those studios at the time. But my point being, I actually spent the time and the money to have those reels digitized because I was like, you know, this tape isn't going to last forever, right? And it's degrading literally by the year. So my point being, it's like I could probably mix out a no drums version of that if you want me to do that and send it to you so you can just play
Oh,
along with it there. Just
I'm
know he kind of floats on the tempo a little bit, so you're gonna have to, you know, stick with it.
yeah,
But
maybe
anyway,
someday.
I
I
look
don't
forward to
know.
hearing what you did. It's
I
great.
mean, that's Mike's song, man. So no, I'm good.
You're like hard pass.
Look, I respect the integrity of the person that did the original. So
Sure,
I would
sure.
I just wanted to pay homage to it because I'm not joking. For 30 years, I've been trying to play it, and I never really practiced enough. It was always just try to play songs for 10 minutes, stop, and move on. Whereas in the last 2 years with YouTube, it's so easy to learn technique and practice
Yeah.
technique. And so I'd say my drumming improved by 65% over the last 2 years just because of practicing technique. So,
Well, and just being able to see somebody do it, right? You
right.
thought your ear would pick up what was going on, but when you see it happen, like you see the efficiency of movement of how the drummer is maybe working around the kit, that you're like, oh, I didn't know that at all.
Right.
Okay. Oh, they're actually playing on an extended hi-hat that lets them play the hi-hat, you know, off on this side instead of the standard crosshand. Oh, that makes it way easier to do those fills.
Yeah. All that stuff. Yeah.
Yep.
All right, man. So we'll
Well,
end it
cool.
here. Hope you enjoyed the video. Say hi to Mike, and of course, tell him I
I
love
will.
that drum part and that song.
I will. Hey, thank you so much. I appreciate you doing this. I appreciate you, you know, frankly, breathing a little bit of new life into that song and into that band. You said it before, but I can't believe it's coming up on 25 years of that record being out. Oh, little point. One of the main things of that session was enjoying watching World Cup that year, right? I think that was the year France won it, and Zidane was such a hero of that cup. So yeah, a lot of good memories there. Our producer was a huge soccer fan.
Cool.
Well, all right, man.
All
Thank
right, Rick.
you.
Good to talk to you.
Yep.
All
Yep.
right.
We'll talk soon.
See ya.
See
Bye.
ya.
sound in shrouded leaves. Midsummer storms out there. Tin cups and crowds. This leash is tighter now, taking me back to something all of us chased at the same time. Pale blue and blinded by screen glow. I wish I could drift away into of taillights into the city limits. Lonely sliver of moon lies low on swirling snow, set in a crown jewel sky. Storm drains are full. I feel the undertow taking me off to somewhere I can be everything I am. Floating and dreaming in pools of rain, where I drift away into into the city